Hey everybody, it's Drags. It's Wednesday, May 22nd, time for episode 299 of Patriots Beat on the CLNS Media Network. Find us at clnsmedia.com. And as always, follow us on Twitter at Patriots CLNS. Welcoming back this week, Evan Lazar, my colleague at clnsmedia.com, covering the Patriots and the NFL for CLNS Media. Of course, follow him on Twitter at EZLazar. That's EZLazar. You over Game of Thrones?
I am not over it yet. No, it's the wound is still fresh. That season 8, I think, was disappointing for most of us, that diehard Game of Thrones fans. That's for sure.
Yeah, I enjoyed your tweets on Sunday night. I want to get your biggest surprise, your biggest disappointment.
I think the biggest disappointment is probably just how rushed the whole thing felt. Lack of really attention to detail that the show was prided itself on was kind of lacking, so that they could fit everything into a 6-episode season and end the series. I think the biggest surprise is probably that neither Dany nor Jon Snow, spoiler alert, end up on the Iron Throne at the end of the whole thing. I mean, I don't know if it was that much of a surprise, but the way that it all went down certainly, I think, was a surprise to many.
You see what I'm doing here, right? With Jamie Collins coming back to New England. Good idea for the Patriots?
Well, I came out pretty hard against this move, and really the reason why, and I've kind of, with the money being what it is, pretty manageable and really no guarantees whatsoever that he's going to see a lot of playing time or even make the 53-man roster out of camp. I've come around a little bit on it, but the main reason is that, when he was here the first time, I thought that he was a very good starter for 2014 and 2015, but there was that attention to detail and the willingness to do the little things, to do the dirty work that a lot of the Patriots defensive players did at such a high level towards the end of the season last year that Jamie Collins never totally got. And then he went to Cleveland, and it was kind of more of the same thing. Now they're going to bring him in on less money to what I would assume be playing a more specialized role on passing downs, you would think.
Absolutely.
Plays himself into more of a bigger role beyond that. And you're going to ask him to do a lot of the little things. And I just don't know if I'm convinced. Maybe he's woken up, right? Maybe the couple of years in Cleveland have, kind of humbled him a little bit, and he realizes now that he's going to have to do that to stay on an NFL roster. But it's the little things like, for example, is he going to set the edge against the run? Is he going to take on the pulling guard so that his teammate can make the tackle and he does the thing that doesn't show up in the box score, but to team defense that works out really well? Is he not going to go? A lot of the time when you watch him play in zone coverage with Cleveland, his eyes are on the quarterback because he's constantly trying to jump routes and ball hawk and get those big interceptions and pass defense. Is he just going to play his assignment and get to his spot and have the wherewithal to be aware of what's going on around him? Those little things add up in the Patriots defense, and that's what makes the Patriots defense good when it's at its best. I think last year in the Super Bowl is kind of the microcosm of the whole thing, Trags, when all 11 pieces are fit together perfectly. It doesn't really necessarily matter if the individual pieces are these Hall of Fame players. The scheme itself will, survive and thrive under that circumstance. If you put one player in there, it's like a Jenga piece, right? If you put one player in there and you pull it out and that player isn't as strong as the rest of the foundation, then, things start to slip through the cracks.
Speaking with Evan Lazar, covering the Patriots and the NFL, doing an incredible job of doing both for CLNSmedia.com. There's the one, and I mentioned you, I know you mentioned the pulling guard. Do you remember the Buffalo Bills game, his last season in New England, right?
Yes.
At Buffalo. Do you know what I'm getting to here?
I believe so.
Yeah, where he rushed right past the pulling guard and was out on an island, and the play was cut back to his side for a 35-yard run, something like that. And that was regarded, a Bills 35-yard run. That was kind of regarded as like the final straw by the Patriots coaching staff.
Right. I mean, that's exactly it. Like when you turn on the tape and you watch Jamie Collins play in Cleveland, his 2017 season was an abject disaster. I mean, he was horrible. The team was horrible. He had a terrible year. He graded out in 2017 as one of the worst starters in football, according to Pro Football Focus. It was something like 44 out of 100 or something catastrophic like that. Last year in 2018, it was better. He was certainly serviceable in that role, and he played over 1,000 snaps for Cleveland. And I think that there was evidence on the tape of him doing a little bit more. His box score stats, he had over 100 tackles. Those things all check out nicely. But at the end of the day, like I said, it's the little things that he wasn't willing to do. He wasn't willing to make those sacrifices for the betterment of the team. He was, too busy trying to get himself in the box score and make some of that money that he ended up making in Cleveland. So now he comes back. He's at a lesser value, obviously. They're not paying him anywhere near as much. They maybe like that a little bit more. And if you remember also at the end of his tenure here with the Patriots the first time around, he was starting to lose playing time in that 2016 season, and Landon Roberts was really starting to take a lot of those early down reps that Jamie Collins was so, often taking. And a lot of people at that point in time are like, what the hell is going on with Jamie Collins? Why are they playing this 6th round rookie over a Pro Bowler, and then he gets traded a week later or 2 weeks later, whatever the case may be. So I think that's the biggest gripe the biggest concern, I shouldn't call it a gripe. The biggest concern that I have with the move is he going to sacrifice and do the little things that the Patriots scheme is going to ask him to do and not do the freelancing and not play outside the scheme to betterment himself and his individual performance?
Let's go over the numbers. $150,000 signing bonus, base salary of $900,000, and incentives that bring his cap charge to about $3 million for 2019. He makes the team, right?
Well, right now I have him penciled in on the team. I mean, I would think that he would have to really have a poor camp to not make the team, but I was actually tinkering with a 53-man roster projection the other day, and just the numbers that they have at certain positions are going to make it pretty difficult for some of these guys to make the team unless they get kind of wonky with the numbers in certain positions. Like, let's say they only carry 4 wide receivers out of camp because they're going to have Josh Gordon and hopefully Demaryius Thomas. Maybe Demaryius Thomas starts the season on PUP and that frees up a roster spot. Maybe you only carry 2 tight ends. Maybe you stash one of your offensive linemen on IR or a practice squad spot, something like that, because otherwise you have all those defensive backs. You have a bunch of quarterbacks, obviously. You're probably you're looking at, unless Jared Stidham can really blow things out of the water in training camp, you're probably looking at carrying 3 quarterbacks out of camp. It gets tricky, but I think that Jamie Collins, there's about 4 or 5 spots I would say up for grabs at the back end of the roster, depending on how they want to work it. And right now I have Jamie Collins securely in one of those 5 spots. It just depends on, if he has a terrible camp and a terrible preseason, then you never know.
Well, let me get to this, because I think one of the reasons you can keep and use Jamie Collins much more effectively this year is you have a more versatile defensive roster, starting with the linebacking core. Hightower, Van Noy, Roberts, Jawan Bentley, and Christian Sam, both rookies, or coming into their second year, didn't play last year. And then you have Calvin Munson and Terez Hall. But don't you think the Patriots are in a better position now to keep Jamie Collins and use him in a more specialized role because of that?
Certainly, and I think when you start talking about those linebackers, you can really kind of start to put them in roles already, and it's pretty obvious. I think that Van Noy and Hightower are guys, especially down the stretch run last year, that you already saw them in these roles of guys that are playing mostly on the line of scrimmage, or at least near the line of scrimmage. You're not dropping either one of those guys too often 12, 15 yards down the field in coverage if you can prevent it. Then you got Landon Roberts and Jawan Bentley, who are more first and second down run stuffing linebackers that are going to play off the ball, but they're really playing on early downs to stop the run. And then maybe that's where Jamie Collins fits in as that off-ball linebacker that's going to play in coverage on passing downs, obvious passing situations, third down, things like that. And we also know on top of his athleticism, and he still has that range and ability to cover a lot of ground. Although I think that some of the mental mistakes that he makes in coverage need to be coached out. He still has a lot of athleticism and range, and he also can still rush the passer. So as a blitzer up the A gap or on a linebacker and stunt or something like that in the games and blitzes that the Patriots like to run with their backers, he certainly fits the mold as somebody that can do a lot of those different things. So I think that they have a nice kind of mix of on-ball, off-ball linebackers, and Collins played a little bit more on the line of scrimmage last year for Cleveland, and it didn't go so well for him. Played about 35% of his snaps on the line of scrimmage and a lot at strong side backer on the same side as the tight end. And against the guy that really just wants to run and chase, he wants to be free and run sideline to sideline and use that athleticism, to have him go head on against double teams on the edge like a Dante Hightower isn't exactly the best usage of his skill set. So maybe they move him back off the ball. They put him in a more specialized role. Obviously I'm sure we were going to touch on this, but it's the Patrick Chung 2.0 theory.
That's what I was going to get to.
Yeah. Like if you can put him in a role that he's going to thrive in and kind of simplify things for him to where he's only in that role, then maybe it can work out here the second time around. And it certainly wasn't poorly, didn't turn out poorly the first time around. They just didn't want to pay him the money that he was going to end up making and kind of decided that trading him was better than losing him for a comp pick.
Well, and remember, Belichick is on record as saying he didn't use Patrick Chung and coach him up the way he felt he should have the first time.
I think that's the biggest difference between this and that, is that the first time around there was nothing wrong with the coaching or Jamie Collins' role on the team. Jamie Collins was playing the position that he should have played when he got drafted. I mean, he was playing off the ball and he was, basically their weak side linebacker most of the time. That's exactly what he should be playing. So it wasn't that, with Patrick Chung, Belichick mentioned this multiple times with Chung. They're playing him at like deep safety, 15, 20 yards off the line of scrimmage, and they're asking him to do things that just weren't his skill set. Then they realized the league was kind of moving towards these hybrid linebacker safety types that are going to come down into the box and cover tight ends and basically play in the slot as a slot defender, as the strong side linebacker actually a lot of the time, but mainly as like a third linebacker. If you're in a 3-4, a fourth linebacker is actually going to be a safety now. That's kind of the new league with the teams passing so often. So that was they saw that kind of trend coming, or maybe even started a little bit, and they reacquired Patrick Chung and quickly put him into that role. And now Patrick Chung, we're talking about simplifying things for Jamie Collins. Patrick Chung has one of the more complicated roles in the entire defense for the Patriots. He's playing slot defender, he's playing linebacker, he's playing safety, he's playing essentially corner a lot of the time when he's covering some of these slot receivers and tight ends and running backs out wide and outside the perimeter, on the perimeter. So he has a very complicated role. So it's Collins, it's more about, shrinking the scope. And whereas with Chung, it actually ended up evolving into, now he's a team captain. It doesn't get much better of a story than what Patrick Chung did the second time around here. I think comparing Collins to that is a little bit lofty.
I do as well. Speaking with Evan Lazar, covering the Patriots and the NFL for CLNSmedia.com. Follow him on Twitter at EZLAZAR. Why did the Patriots bring back Danny Shelton?
Well, I think that, it's pretty simple that other than Mike Pennell, who I really like and I think was an underrated player in New York and a guy that is going to shine here in New England, maybe like similar to like a Alan Branch type player here, maybe not personality wise certainly, but in terms of his playing style, they really didn't have anybody backing him up that had the same kind of skill set of that big body, run stuffing defensive tackle. Last year they had Malcolm Brown and Danny Shelton. Now they have Mike Pennell and Danny Shelton. It's essentially the same kind of 1-2 combination. So I actually really like this move. I think Shelton, towards the end of last season, when he did get back on the field, obviously he had those 4 healthy scratches that kind of stand out as maybe the team not valuing him as much. But I actually think that when that happened, a lot of it was game plan specific. Now, obviously, if a guy transcends the game plan and you want him to be on the field no matter what kind of the situation is, then that's, a better player than a guy that's so situational like Shelton. But he is a one down player essentially in the NFL. And if you're going to play a team that's going to run the ball 65-70% of the time in the game, and you think maybe you're going to play with a lead on top of that and they're going to be throwing the ball a whole lot, then a one down run stuffer really doesn't do you much on game day. So that, I think, is where a lot of the inactives started to pile up. And then when he got onto the field late in the season, week 17 against the Jets, and then in the divisional round against the Chargers, and certainly in the Super Bowl against the Rams, he felt more comfortable in the system, I think, and he started playing a whole lot better, and the tape really reflects that. And he had a really nice game, I thought, and only 15 snaps in the Super Bowl, but he kind of made his presence felt when he was out there. He had that nice tackle for loss that people might remember, and a couple of other plays where they were really trying to get up the field with those defensive tackles, and he was a big part of that and a big part of shutting down that Rams running game. So I think that his familiarity with the scheme kind of developed as the season went along, and he kind of thrived a little bit in that role. And maybe some of those inactives too. I mean, we talked to him about it, kind of lit a fire under him a little bit, that they were giving him healthy scratches, and it kind of made him appreciate being out on the field, on game day a little bit more, and he came out with a little bit more fire too. So I like the move for depth. They needed another kind of big body run stuffer there in the middle.
Speaking of which, Gerald McCoy is now on the market. The Buccaneers on Monday released him, and the Patriots, along with the Browns, the Chargers, the Jaguars, and the Cowboys, according to Adam Schefter, among those in play for the 10-year veteran. It would seem like he'd make sense. And I know you tweeted on Monday that this is a move that would have Patriots written all over it. But does signing Danny Shelton preclude bringing Gerald McCoy on board also?
No, I hope not, because, McCoy is certainly a much better player than Danny Shelton is. But I think that, the Patriots are up against it cap-wise. They're up against around $3 to $3.5 million in cap space right now. Now, the obvious move that everybody's going to talk about to free up the money for McCoy is going to be extending Tom Brady, which you got to think is coming between now and, I would say, September 1st, when that week one salary of his kicks in, and he's due, I think, almost $14 million or something like that. So I think that is coming, but I also think that, just kind of looking at the numbers of a Tom Brady extension, what it might look like, I don't think it's going to create as much cap space as some people think. And the way to do it to create a ton of cap space, like let's say to create like $10 million in cap space, is to structure the contract with voided years at the end of the deal, which isn't typically the Patriots' bread and butter. They would have to, kind of extend him beyond what maybe they even think, or he even thinks he's going to play, and then just kind of void those years at the end and almost release Tom Brady to get rid of some of the cap at the end of his contract, let's say in like 2023 or 2022. That seems like kind of a slippery slope and something the Patriots don't normally do. So I think that you're looking with the Tom Brady extension around $4 or $5 million in cap relief, which would bring them to around, I don't know, $8 or $9 million against the cap. And then maybe you could fit Gerald McCoy in there once that all those dominoes happen. So I think basically what I'm getting at is that unless Gerald McCoy is solely ring chasing and he wants to sign like a 1-year deal here for little money, something like a $5 or $6 million contract where they can work the structure, then get him under the cap, there's a lot of kind of dominoes that would have to fall in line quickly in succession before somebody else jumps in to get McCoy to New England. And then McCoy would have to take less money than he's probably worth on the open market too. So it seems like there's a lot of hurdles to get over to make this one happen.
I would agree with that. And I think it was Phil Perry I was speaking with about a month ago or so, and he had mentioned that on the Tom Brady renegotiation, it would have to happen probably in August.
Yeah.
Or maybe it was you. I can't remember, but I thought I was talking to Phil Perry about this. And that's because you can only renegotiate a contract once a year, and it had already been restructured once within the NFL calendar year, so they'd have to wait until August Does that sound about right?
So there's that rule about they can only restructure a deal within a year, and there's been some conflicting reports, I would say, on whether or not that's entirely true in Tom Brady's case or not. I know Albert Breer has said that his league sources are saying that the Patriots could do the extension at any time, but there's also that real rule in the CBA. I know that Miguel Benzon, aka Pat's Cap, who's my go-to guy for all this type of stuff, is agreeing more with Breer, saying that they probably could do it now if they wanted to do it. But I think the bottom line is with Brady is that the deal is going to get done. Tom Brady is going to retire a Patriot. I don't think anybody has anything to worry about. But at the end of the day, I think that there's this kind of notion or this belief out there that a Tom Brady contract extension is going to free up the books for them to go out and do whatever they want cap wise, and it's going to give them another $10 million in cap space or something like that. And I just don't see that happening unless Brady takes such a huge team friendly discount, like even more so than what he's done in the past. And I don't know if he's necessarily going to do that. So I think that what I said, it's much more realistic to think $4 or $5 million of Brady would probably be, more realistic in terms of what you will save against the cap for his extension. And that kind of gives him like a 3-year extension at about $65-70 million, makes him, not the highest paid quarterback in the league, but certainly pays him a healthy amount of money to keep playing through 45. And that deal would end at 45 versus if you want to kind of knock that cap number down more, you're going to almost have to assign him through 45 and almost to 46 or 47 to kind of put some of that money down the road and almost backload the deal so that you have smaller cap hits at the front. So it's all kind of like cap, jargon and whatever you want to get into the details, but it's not going to create as much cap space as some people think. And unless Gerald McCoy, that can all happen in succession really quickly, and Gerald McCoy says no to more money elsewhere, I just don't know if it's going to happen. He would really need to want to come here to win a Super Bowl, and that would really be exclusively the reason. It wouldn't be a ton of compensation.
Aside from avoiding what happened with the Redskins on Monday and linebacker Reuben Foster suffering a knee injury and getting carted off in an air cast on his leg, what are you looking for in OTAs?
Well, I think that, I'm actually going to write on this for Wednesday. So there's a little sneak preview. I think the biggest thing is what's happening at left tackle. Scarnecchia said that last week when he met with the media, I think it was May 10th or something like that, that he is not healthy enough yet to participate in these OTA practices. So I assume he's not going to be out there, or at least not, at a full capacity. So gets that spot when they do kind of go to the starting offensive line and maybe a 11 on 11 drill, I should say. And who is it? Is it Jared Veldier? Is it Yadni Kajust? If Yadni Kajust is healthy, I know he's been dealing with some injuries and off-season surgery as well. Is it somebody that we aren't seeing right now, like a Cole Croston or Cedric Lang or whoever the case may be? Who's that guy that's kind of filling in for Isaiah Wynn? Because I think that tells you a whole lot about their depth at that position and how they view that depth. Who's the backup left tackle? Then, I think the other one that's big for me is first look at N'Keal Harry. I mean, obviously, you're not going to really get a whole lot of, what kind of role he's going to play. And week to week, it's going to change, obviously, from a game plan's perspective anyways. So you're not really going to necessarily get a lot of that. But what's he look like out there? Does he look like he belongs or is even better than some of the competition that he's facing? How has he kind of refined some of his skills as a route runner that I'm sure he's been working on in the offseason? His release package, some of the stuff at the top of the route, the little details that we talked about when we talked about him, kind of refining those and sharpening those to become a little bit better of a downfield separator. I think a lot of these practices you can know pretty early on with a lot of these rookies if this guy's going to be great. Like you can kind of tell like the way that they're moving and how fast they're moving and the way that they're kind of going about their business. Is this guy going to be a stud? Is this guy going to be a bust? I think you can kind of tell some of those things with some of these practices, but you don't want to overreact to any of it. But I think that you can kind of tell a little bit. And the last thing, Jared Stidham. I think that I'm pretty fascinated to watch this guy throw the ball. Everything that you hear is just how great of a natural thrower of the football that he is. So we'll see what happens with that. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how that quarterback battle shakes out, because a lot of people, I think that Brian Hoyer is going to be on the roster. But there are a lot of, smart people out there that think that Jared Stidham has a chance to push him off the roster as a rookie if he can come out and really, show that he can handle that responsibility already, and maybe he can. So I think that he's somebody to really monitor here going forward as well.
I actually think the Patriots want him to beat out Brian Hoyer. Not that they have anything against Brian Hoyer, but professionally, for the betterment of the roster, and for issues that you mentioned about 20 minutes ago, yeah. I think it would do them a world of good to have Stidham beat out Brian Hoyer so that they're not carrying, the three quarterbacks, and I'm not including Danny Etling. I mean, whether or not he stays or not is, I think, beyond the point. I mean, I think Etling could make the practice squad as well, because I don't think he'd get picked up. Do you?
No, and I think that, really there's precedent for it. I mean, the Patriots went with Ryan Mallett his rookie year as the backup quarterback. They went obviously with Jimmy Garoppolo as the backup quarterback in Jimmy's rookie year. So if you can kind of come out and really impress the coaches and really wow people, really what you look for with guys, like rookies with Stidham is, can he stay afloat, right? Like, is it not too big for him? Is the whole situation is throwing in a pocket that's going to be a little bit muddy and with pressure in his face not too big for him? Is the game not moving too fast? I think that those are things that you can look at. If he looks like he belongs in the off season and in the OTA program, the mini camps, the training camp, and the preseason games, I definitely think that he could push Brian Hoyer and maybe even push Brian Hoyer off the roster. The reason why I am kind of saying that I think that Hoyer is going to be on the roster is just because of the experience that he has as a backup quarterback and how much he works with Tom Brady very closely, is sort of during the week to kind of help Brady with some of the game plan aspects of the week and all that kind of stuff. It would be a little bit of a change. I don't want to call it a big change, but a little bit of a change for Brady in that respect. And I think him and Hoyer have become really tight and really close friends. And if they can fit it, we'll see what happens. But remember also, Trags, don't sleep on two punters on this roster.
Yep, I know. We went over this Jake Bailey last week. This
is going to be like my take, because I really think that it could be a possibility. Jake Bailey kind of comes on and kind of learns the ropes from Ryan Allen, and also maybe as a kickoff specialist as well, taking the kickoff duties away from Gostkowski to free up his leg a little bit. I think that it's a possibility that they carry two punters, which would be bananas, but at the same time, if you cut Ryan Allen doesn't have any practice squad eligibility, and if you cut Jake Bailey, he's not making it back to the practice squad. Somebody's going to sign him and make him their starting punter or their everyday punter. So you're risking losing him if you cut him. I think it's almost a certainty that another team is going to come up and get him if they cut him. So I wouldn't sleep on that either.
Well, certainly you should be following Evan Lazar as Patriots OTAs begin this week. He'll have you covered at CLNSmedia.com. Obviously, as always, follow him on Twitter at EZLAZAR. Follow CLNS Media on Twitter, the Patriots coverage at Patriots CLNS. Evan, thanks for joining me as always, and have fun this week.
Thanks. Can I give a parting shot before we sign off?
Please do.
So I think that it's interesting just thinking about this McCoy thing, then I was just talking to you about it, that the Bucs couldn't find a trade partner for Gerald McCoy. And it sounds to me also like the Minnesota Vikings are struggling to find a trade partner with Kyle Rudolph. And that kind of signals to me that it's really not a seller's market right now on the trade market. And a lot of these teams are kind of wary of picking up hefty veteran salaries like those two guys carry in trades right now, which suggests to me that it's a possibility that Kyle Rudolph might be released by the Vikings. So I think you have to weigh that possibility too, in terms of maybe you have one more spot of like kind of a substantial salary like that, like a guy like McCoy or like Kyle Rudolph. So you kind of have to weigh the options of which guy you would rather have on the team. And I often, I kind of wonder if maybe they lean more towards Rudolph, seeing that the tight end position is certainly a little bit more up in the air than interior defensive line. I think they can get away with the guys that they have on the interior defensive line if need be. So that's something to look for. I think that a lot of these teams are kind of hesitant about acquiring these aging veteran guys with hefty salaries.
Want to thank everybody for downloading today's podcast and thank our great guest and colleague Evan Lazar, covering the Patriots for CLNS. For producer Mike Alonji and the founder of the network, Nick Gelso, this is Mike Petralia, and this has been the Patriots Beat podcast, powered by CLNS Media.
Hello, I'm Dan Lothian, host of the Behind the Media podcast on the CLNS Media Network. Along with Jimmy Young, we dive into the biggest media headlines each week with honest, informed, and sometimes irreverent perspectives. It's not all serious. We deliver information and entertainment. As we like to say on Behind the Media, we find the interesting in media so you don't have to go searching for it. Listen to our podcast and get prepped for the next trip to the water cooler. Subscribe to Behind the Media wherever you get your podcast, or find us on www.clnsmedia.com.